Hi, welcome to the Hidden Gifts of Loss podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have as my guest Laura Carney. She's the author of the My Father's List: How Living My Dad's Dreams Set Me Free. And Laura, you really just embody the hidden gifts of loss. And what my goal is with this podcast, because you took that and you transformed it into this amazing book. And I've just loved following your journey as you tell the story. It's just been, there's so many things that I resonate with in your book. So thank you
Oh,
for putting that gift out into the world. That's a hidden gift. That's not hidden anymore.
oh, thank you so much. I never really know who's like following along, and it is kind of like the story is still playing out, right? Like with my posts and things, I try to be as transparent as possible with sharing what the whole experience has been like. So I'm so happy that you've gotten something from it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It's still unfolding. I mean, it's really never over. I mean, even with your dad, he's passed on, but his story is not over either. He's still
I
here.
mean, I feel like sometimes I really do feel like the list isn't done. There are still list items that are happening in ways they were supposed to happen, whereas sometimes I like just for the sake of needing it to be finished, I was like, okay, I think this was this, and now I'm done because I'm a human being and I needed to have that definition. But I think in the spirit world, it's more like, oh no, this will happen the way it's meant to, and you'll see. And it'll take how long it takes, like we don't get to define that. So I do sometimes feel that way, like I'm still learning, he's still with me, he's still guiding me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I love that. Um, I I feel the same way. I had wanted to start a podcast after my mom died. And it was something and also write their story and the story of what we went through. My parents died right in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, sorry to
So,
hear that.
oh, thank you. So that added this whole surreal layer to, what we went through. And I feel like this is, yes, still part of their story and my story unfolding as when I met Stacy, which is how we got connected. Her Find Your Voice kind of gave me that final push that I needed to just jump in, not try to be perfect, and start a podcast to talk about the hidden gifts of loss and how it transforms you when you go through something that's so life altering. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really tells you a lot about people whenever you hear people talking about the pandemic and they might say something positive that they gained from it, but they'll always like precede that with, okay, I'm not saying the pandemic was good because obviously it was devastating to the entire world and
Mhm.
people had severe losses because of it that were unexpected and almost like unexplainable because it's a thing we never thought we'd ever deal with in our lives. It's like I think most people felt like, well, this is the thing that happened in the past. Like we've moved beyond that now.
Right. Yeah, like the
Yeah.
plague or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like it tells you so much about a person if they're about to tell you something, oh, I discovered a new hobby, or oh, that space was good for me to like get to know myself better. If they precede it with lots of people had family members die and it was terrible, because it tells you they're not just thinking about themselves, like they understand the collective and that really we're all connected.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess if I had a good thing out of the pandemic, it would be like my mom signed up with hospice and a week later we went on lockdown.
Oh my God.
So everything we were kind of expecting with hospice, all of the support we would have had from all of her friends, it all just stopped. So it was just my daughter and I. And in a way, though, it just put all the focus on my mom. Not that it wouldn't have been anyway, right? But we were in this weird little almost protected space, not without the added stress of running out of toilet paper and all the things that everybody was going through, at that time. But we were just in our own little world. And almost it was like the pandemic was just sort of it was this background thing that was happening, right? But
Yeah, I
everything
mean,
focused.
I'm happy that this, I'm sorry, what were you saying at
Oh
the end?
no, no, I'm good. I was done. Go
Oh,
ahead.
you're saying it felt very focused. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
everything was just focused on my mom, and instead of anything else pulling focus, really, it was just about her end journey, which was pancreatic cancer. So it was 10 weeks from the time that I got to her house on Valentine's Day 2020 until she passed.
Yeah, and this was so soon for you. And I think it's really beautiful that you're already seeing positives, like gifts that you received from it, and not just gifts that you received, but rather elements of the situation that felt meant to be or felt like this seems like it was supposed to happen because I feel like sometimes when you experience, and we have this in common, a sudden unexpected loss that is very like, oh, this isn't how I thought this would go. It's like
Exactly.
people want you to just stay in devastation and trauma and always view it as a tragedy. And if you ever say anything about it, like, oh, but this actually felt better for that person, it's almost like, how dare you? Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I do. I do know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. You're
Yeah,
just
I
as
mean, like I guess by the nature of my journey with my book and with my dad's finishing my dad's bucket list for him, I have now befriended a couple of psychics. And one in particular, I met with her, I went on her podcast. It was Alison Dubois, and she is the inspiration for the TV show Medium. I don't know if you remember that a few years ago.
yeah, yeah. I think I think I had seen that.
Oh my God, I have a bird feeder outside just one room away, and the birds are going insane right now, which makes me feel like, okay, I'm on to something, which I think Allison would appreciate. But anyway, when I met with Allison, it was the day before my book came out. And I feel like, well, that's interesting timing because I was
Yeah.
really missing my dad and wanting to know what he thought. And I feel like, I'm not getting like a free reading here from her, but she's probably going to be tapped in
Hmm.
to him if he comes through.
Yeah.
And what she told me that day just completely blew my mind. She basically said, have you considered the possibility that he chose this death?
Wow. That gives me chills.
Has anyone ever proposed that idea to you about your parents?
We kind of played with that idea because my mom she was very OCD. She was big time germaphobe. And we almost kind of joked that she just would not have been able to handle the pandemic. And
Oh,
so we're like, yeah, she decided to just check out so she wouldn't have to deal with this, you know? And then, my dad died a year later, almost to the day. He got COVID and he already had congestive heart failure. So the COVID, exacerbated that situation. And I've always had this vision of my mom, and they were of that generation where the my mom did everything for my dad. He almost had that learned helplessness. I mean, he knew how to make a microwave dinner, but that was about it. And I've always had this vision of my mom like with these angel wings. My mom was also very religious, and I see her. So what happened was my dad fell, and my brother, unfortunately, my parents live in Los Angeles and I live in Ohio. So my brother also lives very close, and he was checking in on my dad, and um he fell, and my brother didn't find him for 24 hours. He had basically just been on the ground for 24 hours. I've always had this vision of my mom having these big angel wings and kind of tipping him over and saying, "Come on, just get up here with me. Let's just
aw.
be together." Yeah. So yeah, in a way, I do kind of think about that as they chose that time.
Well, isn't that a real condition, broken heart syndrome? Like where they say that a spouse dies very shortly after the other
Yes.
spouse because they were brokenhearted.
Yeah, I think it's actually really common.
Yeah.
And my dad was not the kind of person that showed emotion. His only kind of way of doing that would be kind of through anger. Otherwise, he was very quiet or he was very angry. So he didn't appear to have like the emotional intelligence to even cope with my mother going through cancer, which is why I knew that I had to like I took leave from my job, which I thankfully don't have that job anymore. It was a corporate insurance job, but I knew that there was no way he was going to be able to deal with it and to help her. So that's why we went out there, but we were dealing with it in his presence, which in many ways made it harder. He, like, for example, like he wouldn't turn the TV off because that was his coping skill. Even with my mom saying, hey, I really don't want to hear the death toll every day from COVID, just fell on deaf ears. But I think, in his core, yes, that he was heartbroken, and however he processed it and whatever he did for that year while he was alone, we don't, who knows. I would
Yeah.
periodically call him. My dad I think he's only actually called me once in my life. And so, and it was just, it was a challenging relationship. He was a scary father. And so, but I made a point of calling him at least once a month. And I would always kind of have to work myself up to do it. But then once I did, we would end up having a pretty good conversation. So I was really glad that I did that, during that time. And hopefully whatever heartbreak or sadness he was feeling, hopefully that helped,
Which is
with.
interesting that you thought to do that during that time because you didn't know that he was going to pass away.
No, not at all. We had no idea. It was yeah, it was
Was it
go
was
ahead.
was the impetus of that because your mother had just passed away, so it was like you had a better concept now of the just the delicateness of life?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely was. You know how that just shifts your perspective that, tomorrow's not promised. So
I mean, I would theorize too that your mom's spirit, which was now in a different place, might have helped you.
I I so totally believe that, which takes me to back to your story and how
Yeah.
you can see your dad just you even said at one point that, I wrote down some lines that really stuck with me. He said, I'm fine. I'm pure love now. People are being brought to your doorstep and channeling me. I'm making this happen. I'm pulling the strings. I love that.
Oh, I think I wrote that in the book, didn't I?
Did, yeah, you wrote that in the
Oh
book.
my
I
gosh.
think it was somewhere around before you went to Europe or
Yep.
yeah.
There was that plane conversation I had, which I don't know about you, but like I always find I'm more connected in prayer or just to spirit or angels or whatever they are when I'm flying. And I've told people that before and they have said things like, "Oh, it's the sensory deprivation. That's the reason. That's the reason it's happening. There's nothing around you that's distracting you." But I always feel like, no, it's that I'm up in the clouds, man. Like,
Right?
I'm in their realm.
Exactly, right? That's where they're watching everything
Yeah,
from.
just like, well, I think they can watch from anywhere, but just
Yeah,
like look out the window and you feel like you're kind of having a brief visitation to heaven.
you
So
kinda
if you
do.
feel closer to it, then why wouldn't your brain be more open to receiving? And it felt like a big risk to me to actually write that in the book, what that conversation was like, but it felt so powerful that I just felt like I needed to, because up to that point in the story, I think this was chapter 9, and up to that point, I've been giving little snippets here and there of what I perceived to be my dad's spirit trying to communicate with me,
Mm,
whether it was a couple of words or, seeing a dragonfly at just the right moment. And I look up, well, what do dragonflies mean? Because I have heard that they can manipulate animals, and because animals are just fueled by energy. So I was sort of giving little hints of that, but I wanted to give, I don't know. I think I wanted to give the reader a better understanding of what my relationship with his spirit was becoming. Because I don't view my relationship with him in spirit as just like my relationship with him in life.
mhm.
Because, similar to your dad, although for completely different reasons, I did feel like my father died with complications between us not being resolved.
Mhm.
And I needed them to be resolved so that I could feel better about my own life and about my choices and about the parts of me that I thought were like him that scared me. So, really, the book, anytime he appears in the book, it's showing you who he was to me as a father, not necessarily who he was as a full person, because he had a very complex, interesting life. But he also was a father, and that's the person I knew him as. And there were elements of that experience that for me I needed to cope with and deal with. And then there were also things that started happening where all of these incredibly positive, enriching memories of him started coming back to me as I was doing the list. And it was like, I think it was almost like because I was making such a positive choice to go after his dreams, which came from him, from his real spirit deep down. I mean, this is so weird. I've never said this out loud before, but I think when we write down goals like that for our lives, that's our spirit talking, because
Yeah.
it's the part of us that has no restrictions, that isn't limited by whatever limiting beliefs we might have about what's possible. It's just the part that dreams. And that's our core essence. And that was the part of him that at age 29 wrote that bucket list when I had just been born. So
Wow.
now I feel like when I had just been born, that's the part of him he was showing to the world. That's who I got of him when I was just born. That's my introduction to life as a human, is this person who's living guided by spirit. And of course, later, as he got into middle age and, life's ups and downs started affecting him as they do to us all, maybe that wasn't the main thing guiding him all the time. And what I was now experiencing of him in spirit was, I don't have those hangups now. I'm just me. I'm just love, like I wrote in the conversation I felt I was having with him. I'm just pure love. That's who we are when we die. And we don't have these human, and I've read about it since. Like I've read that that's what happens, that we just become our core essence, and whatever fears or worries that we had while being a human being are gone.
Mhm.
And we
Oh,
have an opportunity in spirit to almost, I don't want to say make amends, but I do feel like that's sort of what happens. That people who've lost a parent, especially, or any other relationship where maybe there were some things about the person they didn't understand, or some things that weren't resolved, or some forgiveness they needed to give. I do believe that the spirit of that person helps them through it and walks them through it, because that love and that connection that you have, it doesn't die just because the person did.
that's so beautiful. Yeah. And it's so true. And there's no way you can know that until you do go through that loss. My relationship with my parents has changed for the
Yeah.
better, and I had this thought that, I didn't lose them. Like actually found them. I found them in a different form.
That's so
And
beautiful.
ugh, and what you said about all those things you have as a human where you're struggling and you're worried. And my parents both, I think, my mom was a big worrier. She just absolutely worried about everyone. And she had a lot of OCD behaviors that I didn't understand when I was growing up. I mean, I still don't really understand, but I caught a glimpse of her the first night I was at her house doing one of her OCD behaviors that I hadn't known about, which was she stood in front of the stove and she rocked back and forth and grabbed the burner handles like 3 times each. And and she looked over at me and she could see in my face that I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And she said, "I know I'm OCD, but this is how I've kept the house from burning down all these years." And, like, in that moment, I understood all of it. She thought she was keeping everybody safe, and she really believed that these rituals were absolutely essential to do that part of her role, as our mother. So, I all of a sudden had so much, like, compassion and forgiveness and even forgiveness of myself for how irritating I found her to be,
Because
you
you
know,
saw her doing it even when she was sick.
even when she was sick. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the things that we say when we're sick. And I mean, I had an experience like that recently with my husband, and I just had like of the flu or something, and I was saying something I was worried about somebody else who I was afraid I had hurt them, and he's like, "Wow." like like you're supposed to be worried about yourself right now and getting better, and the fact that you're still talking about this while you're sick just tells me like this is like a real, like, I don't even remember how he defined it, but like this shows me who you are.
Exactly. It's like compassion. Like now that they have moved to another place, I have so much compassion for them, even for my dad, even for how I feel unfulfilled kind of his life was. I don't think that he was really smart. I think if he'd been like a history professor or something, because he could remember, okay, he can remember the scores of probably every football game he ever went to.
Crazy.
And I see them at peace now and just being that pure love and just wherever they are, having a good time. When you talked about the Rose Bowl, my dad took me to the Rose Bowl when I was 6.
What? That's so
Yes.
cool.
Yes, and he remembers who played and he remembers what the score was. And even though he told me, I don't remember. But there was a lot of parts in your story where I was like, "Oh my God." Like when you start off on the Santa Monica Pier. I grew up, in LA, so I spent a lot of time on the Santa Monica Pier, and it was really
Aw.
fun watching you visit places where I spent my youth. And I really loved that these are the moments that just make it's so clear that this is real. When you wanted the score of that football game to be his number, and then it was, I even now
Yes.
get chills when I
Yeah,
think
I
about
can
that.
share with you too the face that you just made is the face that I made when it happened, and my husband took a picture of it, so I can share that. I wanted to put that in the book, but then I realized, well, I don't know if it's going to make sense. I should just show the game, but yeah, and it was his age, the age he was when he died. That's what I realized after I said it in prayer, like, oh man, Laura, don't play with fate like this. Like they're not here to do parlor tricks for you. But I was just curious, I guess. Like, and then I think it was just also like my wanting that proof of connection, because this was still new to me that I was connecting with him. And once in a while, you can actually say, hey, I'm really needing a sign right now. Can you give me a sign? I'm in trouble. I don't know how I'm going to navigate this particular thing. Just give me, and they will like deliver. Um, One of the psychics I
Yeah.
talked to said, since my dad has been, uh, who knows where he is now? Either he has reincarnated or he's in heaven, but he hasn't been in his own body for 20 years. She said, oh, he's really good at this now. And he's teaching other people how to do it. And I
Whoa.
said, oh, maybe that's why, like, a lot of the time when I feel like he's telling me something, it's like getting more and more complex. Like it feels like it's a puzzle and he's wanting me to solve it. And almost like when he was alive and he would give me trivia questions, like he's enjoying watching me get to what it is. And it's like if I can just believe and figure it out, then it's like it's just like he's still alive, having that same relationship with me.
Wow. Like what are some of those puzzle pieces he's
Oh
giving you?
gosh. This is a good one. I feel like I never have written about this anywhere. Okay, so around the time I finished the list, which was December of 2022, which, as you know, in the book, I said I wanted it to be 2020 because the first list item said I hope to live until the year 2020. So my whole thing was, well, he died in a car crash when he was 54, and he should have lived in at least until 2020. That would have been a more normal life. So how about I give that to him? That was my goal. And
Mhm.
then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So that goal had to be adjusted, which again, I thought was him kind of teasing me because he knew my greatest insecurity in life is timeliness, like being on time for things. So it was like I was now going to have to face my greatest insecurity, even with a thing that I had set up myself. This wasn't a job someone had given me, although
Right.
he argued that he did. It
Yeah.
was a project I was doing for love, and still with this, I would not make my deadline.
Mhm.
So I adjusted the deadline to just be, as we were talking about before, when it wanted to be, like what it
Mhm.
needed to be. And it ended
Mhm.
up being 2022.
Mhm.
So after I finished it, I had an interview with someone at Inside Edition who actually had talked to me very early in the process. In 2017 was when I set out to do his bucket list. And I met this woman, Lee Sheps, and she had me on her show. She was just a friend of a friend in New York. And it was great. And I said, I think because you were my first interview, you should also be my first interview when I finish the list. And I told my editor I was going to do this. And it was still 6 months before the book was coming out. So she was like, it's really too soon for like we haven't even like finished the design yet. Like you really should be waiting until it comes out. Or you could just use up all of the press you're gonna get now, and then when the book comes out, people will forget what this is. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that's what she was afraid of. And then I said, but it's just Inside Edition. And she's like, okay, but only that. Little did I know, lots of news organizations watch Inside Edition. So what happened was like I had an intuition that there would be press and there would be interest in it, but this was kind of beyond my wildest dreams. Like what happened was like 2 weeks later, someone from the Washington Post saw the Inside Edition interview and she called me and wanted to interview me. And then she wrote this beautiful article about how I had just finished the list and I had a book coming out. And then that got read by, like, it went viral. It went all over the world. And the next thing I knew, I had like the people from Tamron Hall calling me. I had the people from Drew Barrymore calling me. And I had to make this decision of, I mean, even though I had a publisher and they were guiding me in something I had never done before, ultimately I'm the one in the driver's seat of what's happening. And they're still sort of saying, hey, that we're in dangerous waters here because you could just you could ruin your chances to have press around the launch time if you keep doing this. But my intuition said, I think I'm supposed to do this. I think I'm supposed to keep doing these interviews. I feel like my dad's telling me I should do it. But
Yeah.
still, I still had some of those people pleaser qualities inside of me that
Yeah.
weren't permitting me to make that choice. So one day I was just sitting there, like I'd had a call with my editor. I was really grappling with this conflict of, do I do what I think is right for this, or do I try to please the people who are telling me what's right for it? Because I don't want to I never wanted to be the person who would screw things up for myself.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, my husband comes home from the store and he's like, what's burning? And I said, nothing. And he's like, well, the toaster's on. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, I mean, we had a relatively new toaster.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like it was malfunctioning or something. And it was plugged in like it normally would be. But like the lever was not pushed down and yet it was on. Like it was toasting.
What?
Yeah, like it was super hot. It didn't make any like rational sense at all that this could be happening. It doesn't look the way a toaster's supposed to look when it's super
Yeah.
hot. And yes, yet it was. And like that's one thing spirit can do is they can manipulate energy. It's like
Mhm.
almost one of their favorite things to do. So like
Mm.
lights going on and things like that.
Yeah.
So I made a joke. Like I was like, well, if that's my dad, he's just telling me I'm toasted because I had just made the choice to say yes to Drew Barrymore,
Uh-huh.
which I knew was going to lead to even bigger
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Or I had a son and did. I ended up doing NBC Nightly News. A couple weeks later, they came to my house. I did NPR. Yeah. So that was a path I had just chosen. And now all of a sudden this is happening. And I said, yeah, it's because I'm toast, and like I'm done for. And then I
Mhm.
said, and then I stopped for a minute. I said, wait a minute. What if it's not I'm toast? What if it's I'm toasted?
Oh,
Because my dad was such a huge advocate of toasts, of making toasts to people.
oh my God.
That's why in the beginning of my book, the epigraph was his favorite toast, the ode on a Grecian urn.
Uh-huh.
And we always had this inside joke about it because he would quote like truth, like beauty is truth, truth is beauty, that's all you need to know on earth. We would joke about how he always attributed it to Yeats. And I was like, no, dad, it's Keats, because I was an English major. So like I knew it was Keats. And he was like very proud of me every time I corrected him. So I felt like that, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Did you see what just happened?
No.
Okay, I got really worried for a second. So I always wear this horseshoe necklace, and I thought it broke
Oh,
for a minute.
I saw that. Yeah, on you when you
It
first
just it
came
just
in.
came off. Yeah. It's
What?
it's not broken. I think it was just loose. But that's so see, there you go.
See?
That
That
could be, I
that
mean, the fact that that happened in that moment and it's happening right now while I talk to you, that just
yeah.
tells me like my dad knows your parents. There's something going on.
No, right?
Energy is high in this
Yes.
conversation. And I mean, that increases the odds of those things happening too. But to me, that's just him being like, yeah, you were right in your assessment. I was toasting you. And because
Hmm.
that's what I mean by the puzzles. It's like he always wanted to like work my brain basically. And I think it's more fun for them if it's like there's many layers to what they're saying.
Oh my God. I was thinking too that he was saying you're on fire, kind of like, go with
Oh,
this, you know?
oh, I like that.
Yeah, go with these
That's
interviews.
cool.
It and I'm not obviously it sounds like making that choice was the right choice because it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like you had not enough press or not, like the kind of scarcity that the people that were telling you don't do this were having, like you're gonna run out or you're gonna, you
Yeah, it
obviously
was.
didn't.
It was. I mean, I ended up getting asked to be on the CBS Sunday Morning because I got NPR, and I wouldn't have NPR if I hadn't done the other stuff. And granted, CBS Sunday Morning didn't happen until around the time the book came out. And they said, don't do any press. I mean, this is real. Like, that's just what those shows do. They're like, don't do any press before you talk to us because we
Mm,
want to feel like we're the first who are breaking this story. So I might have lost opportunities to do things like the Today Show or whatever else because those shows don't want to compete with each other. But it
mhm.
was okay because my agent was thrilled because she's like, man, any author who goes on CBS Sunday Morning is going to sell books. Like that's the show, and you got it. And it's like I wouldn't have had it probably for all we know if I hadn't made that decision. And it was okay because they like they said don't do any more press. So what ended up happening was it was sort of like it was very unusual. Like most authors I don't think have press this way, but I had this like blip right after I finished the list of all of these shows wanting to talk to me, and then that kind of increased my pre-orders for the book. So people were seeing me on Tamron Hall, and then it was available for pre-order on Amazon so they could pre-order it. And then
Oh,
it became a thing where I had 6 months leading up to the launch, and I knew I was going to be on CBS Sunday Morning. So I wasn't very worried about what the press would be.
mhm.
And it was building momentum. So it was sort of like I treated that time period on my social media as teaching people this is what it's like so they could kind of walk in my shoes, like this is what it's like when your book's about to come out, here's the excitement of it. And I think it was almost more exciting that they were all now anticipating it, like they had had a flavor of, oh, this is it gonna be big, and they could order the book now, and now we're on the ride with you. And they had no idea that I was going to be on CBS Sunday Morning until like a week before it happened, and then it happened on Father's Day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like I had this little secret I was going to reveal. It was really, and that was good for me too because it actually it was how I had done social media for the list the whole time,
Mhm.
and it helped me to continue that because I always feel like when an author puts out a book, there's a lot of anxiety around how am I going to convince people to buy this,
Yeah.
what's the right way to do that, what press do I need to get, what should my newsletter look, people do newsletters on email and I did that too for a little while. What should my social media presence be, because it's very difficult I think to be an author and then also become the face of it, because you're really
Mm,
wearing two hats, because authors are much more introverted and introspective, and a salesperson has to be outgoing and a personality.
yeah.
So I struggled myself with what is that going to look like? How am I going to do this? And it was actually one of Stacy's friends. I had an interview with, or like a free consultation. And he's like, Laura, you did the list your way. It was such a unique project. You got it done your way. I
Mhm.
think being an author, you're also going to do your way. And that is what works for you. So stop worrying about being this like capital A author who has to like fit in with the code of all book authors everywhere, and just do it your way. So I always treated the book launch, the tour, still now I'm still recapping the tour on my Instagram. So if anyone wants to go to my father's list, you can see it. I still treat it to this day as this is such an incredible ride that I get to go on because I did this project. It wasn't a given that this was going to happen. And I'm taking you with me. And isn't this cool? Like I've always approached, I've never actually said to anyone, please buy my book. I've
Yeah.
never done that
Yeah.
because
Wow.
it was born of tragedy, you know,
Yeah.
like without my dad dying in a car crash when he was 54, this wouldn't have happened. So
Right.
I can't be like, hey, please help me out and buy this so I can make some money off of it. Because it's never been I mean, the money that is coming from it, I can apply to a foundation in my dad's name that I can then use to help other people with their bucket lists. That's my
Mhm.
goal. I want to pay it forward and keep this cycle going. So yeah, I would like for that foundation to have funds so that I can help people with it.
Mhm.
And I did actually do some work writing the book, so I'm allowed to have a little bit of
Of
compensation for that.
course.
But
Yeah.
because you know, my ego or my feelings about whether or not I'm a good writer, or you know, like my need to be celebrated, or my need to like rationalize or justify all of this by did it make money, because that has not been a motivating principle of it. I think the reasons that people buy this book are different. And you know what you just said to me about like, oh, you were in Santa Monica and you were at the Rose Bowl and I was at those places. Like what that tells me is that you're having an experience with the book that I have witnessed other people have, which is I was meant to find this book. This book is speaking to me and I found it right when I needed it. And that gives me freaking chills because what is happening there is you're having the same feeling I had about finding the list. Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Yes. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. So like, yeah, the book, the project, it's bigger than you. It's like it's happening through you
Mhm.
and it's
That's
going
right.
out into the world and it's doing exactly what it's the legacy that your father is leaving you. And now together you're leaving, to the world and to who is meant to find it.
That's right.
It's so beautiful.
And it's all about surrender. You know, it's like when I went on Tamron Hall, when I was on NBC Nightly News, when I did CBS Sunday Morning, this is not me dropping names. I'm just saying the factual things that happened.
Right.
When I did that stuff, people were nervous for me, you know, because I am
Really.
an awkward, shy person. Like, I have got a lot of Irish in me. I'm very verbose. I love the podcast format because then I can just let it rip.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
although I do honestly try to rein it in a little bit. But like going on those shows was nerve wracking. And what would always happen, and this has happened, I would say, with every single talk I've done now, not just on the shows, but with every bookstore, you know, no matter how small the audience, it doesn't matter. Something takes over me every time I do those things. And it happened, I just spoke to a high school 2 days ago, 70 kids. That was probably my biggest audience yet. And I'm
Mhm.
going to tell you my toughest audience too, because it's
Oh, I
70
bet.
high school seniors
Oh,
a week
geez.
before they graduate. I
They
mean,
know everything
there
already.
was one kid who
Right.
literally had his eyes closed. So I was like, how do I get you to listen? So yeah, probably my toughest audience yet. And still that happened. Something took over me so that suddenly I was charismatic. I was able to communicate. I was able to reach them where they were. I think, I mean, that's what everyone told me after it was over, because I couldn't be the one to know for sure because I always have a blackout when I do it,
Wow.
which is like what happens to psychics. It's what happens to people who channel. They don't remember what they just said or did.
Wow. That's fascinating because it was spirit moving through you.
Yeah, I think it's my
Yeah.
dad. I mean, or
Dad,
something,
yeah.
or a guardian angel, or I don't know. But
Yeah.
on the first time I did it on my book launch here in Montclair, where I live, I was so lucky because I had the news anchor from CBS Sunday Morning, Jim Axelrod. He lives in my town, and
Oh,
the day that he came to my apartment for that show,
mhm.
it came up that my launch was happening in a bookstore that was local, and he was like, "Do you have anyone to interview you?" And I wanted him to do it, but I wasn't going to come out and ask him. And
Yeah,
it ended
yeah.
up being him. So it was like a phenomenal interview, like in person. And now the draw is,
Wow.
oh, this celebrity is going to be there. But I was so scared. I was so nervous. And I remember being in the bathroom beforehand and looking in the mirror and just saying, like, Dad, I need you to help me. Like, you were a performer. My dad was a singer, he was a comedian, he was a personality, and I didn't think I had those qualities in me. Like, I'd never known myself to have them.
Mhm.
um you know Withstanding like giving speeches for student council in high school, that's about it.
Yeah.
So, which, you don't need a whole lot of personality to do that. So I just felt like, please just use me, and it's been like that ever since.
Mm. And isn't that like the most powerful prayer? Use me. Just let go. And I've asked the same thing, like starting the podcast. I was really nervous, to do it, but I just kept getting messages, like from my parents, like, yeah, no, please, this is exactly what you were made for, just talk to people about this, bring this awareness. I always have a picture of them. It's right here on my desk, and I always light a candle before I do an interview, and I mean, I had no experience interviewing. I was a theater kid, right? So, I mean, I was comfortable with that. And I also was a hairdresser for 30 years. I still have friends that come, and it's like, oh, that's what we do in the salon. We just talk about everything. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, it's not that big of a leap. And when I had the thought, like you said, this is this is bigger than me. This is really not about me. It's I'm telling the story. I'm a character in the story, but it's really not about me. It's about so much more. And it's about things that we don't the unseen world, the spirit world, and it is evidence that it's all real. If you have any doubt, the score of the football game, hello. I mean, just
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, so many things like that happen. And I mean, isn't that all that life is? Really?
yes,
We're
it
all
really is.
vehicles for God's love.
Yes. And love, that's what it's about. That's really all that's really left behind, right? When you're gone. And that's like really the most important thing is it's the people you love. And if you don't really get that when you lose somebody, then it's like, oh, okay, here's a reset for priorities. This is what matters.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, just to bring it full circle. Earlier, we were talking about how I met that psychic, Alison Dubois, and she had said to me, "What would you think if your dad chose this?" And she was telling me, like, I mean, the stuff she was saying, she would have no way of knowing.
Mhm.
My book wasn't out yet. She hadn't read the book. I mean, maybe someone who read the book could have a sense of this, but she's like, she's like, I get with your dad like a fast energy, like he's moving his hands a lot. Was that what he was like? Like she's like, oh, he's a trip. He's really funny, and it was like she was just picking up on this stuff that is so him, that I missed about him, because that's really who he was. He was just probably a genius, so good at entertaining, always on, moving. Sometimes though, as a teenager, I was like, okay, come on, enough already.
Yeah.
But that's how I can hear him now in my head being like, okay, yeah, I know. But that's how he was. And she's like, his energy almost matches the way that he died.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
Yes, that's
She's like,
fascinating.
and also when he died, he had a heart condition. He had an enlarged heart. He had GERD, and he had lost a ton of weight. So it was like I had this 1 year to 2 year experience where I saw him very ill, and it
Mhm.
was scary because he was one of those people who just he loved being alive. He would enjoy things to the fullest. So if there was food, he loved food. That meant he usually carried a few extra pounds that he didn't want to be carrying because he was also an athlete, in his youth. So to watch him suddenly be very thin,
Yeah.
it was weird. And it was because he couldn't eat certain things that were too hard on his esophagus. And so he was developing this GERD. And then it was like he had this secondary thing happening of this enlarged heart. And with the last time I saw him in person, he was very nervous to have a surgery for it. So the effect of that on me, I think, was I had to go through like a year or so there where I was sort of launching my life and moving away from home and getting an internship in New York and the things that brought me there,
Mhm.
at the same time worrying that my father might die from this illness. And so it's like, even though he died the way that he did, I still had a little bit of preparation of
Mhm.
thinking that that could happen.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I had that moment, even though I also think there was something divine happening there, what that I described in the book, where I was looking at the billboard on the way back to New York after seeing him. And suddenly I thought, oh, I'm not going to see him again. And then he
Wow.
died 5 days later. So I think that was a combination of just reasoning, but also something. It was like, you always know if it's spirit, if it's like this, if it's urgent.
Yes.
Has that happened to you?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Because it's not your thought.
It's not your,
You
yes.
you received it.
I know
Um,
what you mean.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was like the first or second time that had happened. So, and like you said, you became more open. I think were you talking about this earlier? Like, were you always a person who was open to the spiritual side, or did that happen more after your parents died?
Yeah, I was always kind of a seeker. So I was, yeah, open to it, but definitely more
I
after.
mean, I think I had maybe the propensity for that just because I'm a creative person and creative comes from the unconscious,
Right.
which is where they show up in your unconscious mind. So
Exactly.
a person who's very controlled and lives very cerebrally, they're going to have a harder time with that communication. So I think I was sort of primed for it in that way.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's because my dad and I had such a shorthand. Like we just had such a kindred spirit relationship when he was alive that it made it easier.
Mhm.
So I wasn't someone who believed in any of this stuff
Wow.
until he died the way he did. But now it's like, what Allison said to me, that just really rings true to me. She's like, he was ill and his spirit had a choice. Either he could have had a long death from a heart condition,
Mhm.
or, because it wasn't like a heart attack, it was a heart condition that he could have gotten sicker from,
Yeah.
or he could have died in an instant,
Mhm.
which I've been told by people who have actually survived car wrecks. They weren't in any pain.
Mhm.
Something happens where your endorphins kick in,
Yeah.
even if you have, like, someone told me, I want you to know I was in a car wreck where I had damage to several internal organs and I had internal bleeding, and yet I don't recall feeling any pain when it
Wow.
happened. Just like when I was in the hospital and I had surgery and I woke up later, then I had pain. But when
Mhm.
it was happening, it wasn't like that because something protects you and takes over. So I like to feel like, I think I wrote this in the book. I like to feel like his spirit just jumped out
Mhm.
immediately, and it
Mhm.
wasn't. But I have to tell you, I didn't always think that way. For a very long time, most of my 20s and my 30s, I struggled very much with the idea that my father had endured unspeakable pain in the way that he died, and I couldn't be there to protect him. I had this like terrible survivor's guilt. I don't know if
Oh,
you relate to
wow.
that at all, but that's what it felt like for me.
Wow.
Did you
Yeah.
experience that too?
Yeah. I didn't really, because of the fact that from the time I found out that my mom was sick, like, I showed up. You know what I mean? Because if I hadn't, like, when she had breast cancer 10 years earlier, due to, I had a small child, work, all these different things, I wasn't able to go and be with her. She was not alone. She had a very good friend that went to all the chemo, and she obviously survived breast cancer for, I think it was like a 12-year survivor until she got this. So I was able to be there. So I was kind of lucky that I didn't have that. But what you're saying, it makes so much sense. And from everything that you've said about your dad, it totally makes sense that he would choose that exit. You
You
know,
think?
I do, because like what he doesn't seem like, you said, not, he loved life and he loved food and all those things that he kind of wasn't able to do anymore
Yeah,
on
that
this.
was, I think he was having a hellish existence when he was sick.
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, it seems like his spirit was like, okay, let's just not do this. And I can have so much more fun with Laura because she's going to find the list anyway. And then we're going to write this book together.
You know what's so funny about that too is I saw the list right after he died, I think.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a notebook or notebook paper and seeing talk with the president. I remember seeing that when I was
Mm,
25, a week after he died, because we had some of his things. My mom and my brother went over to clean his apartment, and as I described in the book, I didn't feel like I was strong enough to do it.
mhm.
And I still regret that to some degree, but it's like you have to forgive yourself for how you act in the moment of sudden grief like
You
that.
really do. Yeah.
But they had brought some things home that were in the basement. I do think I saw it, and I think I said to myself, "Ugh, why were you like this?" Like
Mm-hmm.
this is why I always felt like I didn't really know who you were and couldn't understand you as an adult, and sometimes felt like I couldn't rely on you because you had your own goals and they were insane. Like that was my mindset when I was 25.
Sure.
And even though I think I accidentally saw it for years after that, I would think to myself once in a while, oh, I took his pen when I was offered something of his. What did my brother get? Like I would think about it. What did
Mhm.
he get? Because I didn't know.
Oh,
He chose. And I think that was the list, like calling to me.
okay.
Because he had
Wow.
it for 13 years.
Your brother had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
he didn't. Wow.
And he gave it to me. And it's like I think it was his role to support me doing it. He wasn't supposed to do it,
Hmm.
which is its
And
own,
you,
that's its own adjustment. But
uh-huh. And you weren't ready at that point. I mean,
that's
you were
exactly right.
25. You were
That's exactly right.
so young. You were younger than my daughter is now. That's so young.
Well, I mean, I do have friends now who've gone on like what I like to call grief missions of healing, where they do something that's like a bucket list or something intentional to honor someone who are in their 20s, and it's
Yeah.
right after the person has died that they do it. But, for me in particular, no, no, I absolutely was not. I had to have, I think, those 13 years of living the way that I was living
Mhm.
and
Right.
grappling with these parts of me that were going unexpressed.
Mhm.
And, I think I had to reach a point of desperation and fear about what was going to happen with my life. And also like, an unwillingness to continue to be in pain.
Yeah. Yeah. You had your lessons that you had to go through to be ready to receive that mission.
Yeah.
What was that moment when you knew this is, I'm doing this? I know you talk about it in the book, but I'd love to hear you say it.
I mean, it was instantaneous. When my brother showed me the list, I just knew as soon as I saw it, I need to do this. It wasn't logical. And I think it was, like I said, he wrote that in pure spirit, like that was being expressed and it resonated with my spirit. That's who received it.
Yeah.
And there's these moments in life, I think, where like something just gets heightened and we can do that. And maybe my birth was that moment for him.
Mm.
And I think my wedding was that moment for me. And it wasn't, but the thing is, it wasn't just my wedding, it was also my brother's wedding because he was about to get married in 2 weeks.
Oh.
So I mean there's something about that feeling of compassion for someone you love and what their grief might be, because I was really thinking about that a lot in the time period leading up to my brother's wedding of how can I be here for him
Oh
in the
yeah.
way that dad might be, because I just went through it myself 6 months earlier, like that loss. I mean, there's a picture of me at my wedding holding that bottle of wine that my dad had put aside for that day, and I'm crying that's how we honored him by drinking the wine. Like I said, he
Oh,
loved toasts. So that's how we
yeah.
honored him. And uh, I didn't want my brother to have that experience of missing joy because he
Mhm.
was too regretful about worrying that my father wasn't there. And
Mm.
I don't know what his experience was because we talked about, men are not always as expressive because they think they want to protect us. But I just knew that as my younger sibling, I still had this feeling of I wanted to protect him. So that was really going
True.
through my mind a lot. And it was almost like now I feel like I was standing at a crossroads in my life because I had become an activist with safe driving,
Mhm.
but I also felt like there was something more. Like there was something more than what I was doing that I was supposed to be doing because I was learning like the legal aspects of it. How do we change laws? I was learning like the cognitive scientific parts of distracted driving. How do we get people to stop doing this habit? It's like trying to get people to stop smoking. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
at that point, it had become so prevalent that it's like
Uh-huh.
if you tell someone, hey, this is bad for you and it's bad for other people, it's like, yeah, but this is what we do. Like this
Yeah.
is culture. And that was, as a journalist, especially, that was very frustrating for me because
Mhm.
I love the power of the written word and the power of journalism and how it wakes people up. And,
Yes.
I'm sure, like, for example, that movie, The Insider, where I think it was Al Pacino and Russell Crowe, and they showed the tobacco industry and how someone knew like how bad smoking actually was. Do you remember that movie?
I do. Yeah, vaguely. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that movie a lot during that time because it was like people saw a story unfold on screen of the truth, what's
Hmm.
really going on. And I think people are very, we understand as an American society that we're not always being told everything.
Yeah.
And that's what I was learning about car makers and about Apple and AT&T. Like they knew since the mid 90s what using a phone does to your brain while
Yeah.
driving. Like they knew, and
Yeah.
they chose to not share it
Hmm. Yeah.
because they're an industry.
Profit. Right? I mean,
And like if someone makes a phone call or text, or is even if they're doing it hands free, like they're not gonna kill someone every time. you know
yeah. Like,
but just the fact that they knew that it ups your chance by 25% that you could crash your car, like 25% is enough for me to
yeah.
not do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. And then you mentioned, yeah, hands free. It doesn't matter because your brain is
It's
on
in
two
your
things
brain. Yeah.
at once. And yeah, and someone, I don't remember who, but was saying there's really no such thing as multitasking. You're really only doing one thing in that moment, you're
Right.
driving or you're in this conversation, right?
Right.
And
Well, and
yeah.
and your auditory part of your brain and your visual part of your brain work very much in concert.
Mm.
So, like, I was looking at, I have this graph that I got from the National Safety Council years ago, just based on all of these university studies that were done. And they figured out almost like to a number what was the most distracting thing you could do while driving and like what affected you to a point where this is too much.
Mm.
And I found it really interesting when I was looking at it the other day. Talking to a passenger was very close to talking on the phone. And I thought that's fascinating because people ask me that all the time. Like, why couldn't I talk on the phone if I can talk to the person who's in the car with me? It's still a
Mhm.
conversation. And I thought,
Mm.
yeah, that makes sense because it really is. It's like your auditory system is being overwhelmed. So it takes away from your visual system. And when you're driving, like that part of you, like you need that
Yeah.
off, like completely aware because you don't know what's going to come out of right or left field at any
Yeah.
time.
Mm-mm.
So I thought, well, what is that? What is it about being a passenger that is actually like, even though it's at the same level, obviously it's going to happen. You're going to have people in your car, you're going to have conversations with them. And then I remembered what they taught me at the National Safety Council, which is it's different if you're having a live conversation with a real person in the car with you because they're on the trip with you. So they will react and they will say, "Oh, look at that." Like I'm a backseat driver with my husband all the time. Stop.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're protecting themselves too.
Yeah,
So like you have another co-pilot in a way. They'll stop
exactly.
the conversation. But if you're in the driver's seat and you're doing the driving and you're the pilot, for lack of a better word, and you're having a conversation, but the person's not there. They can't do that. So now you have competing, like things are, you're not just multitasking, you actually have two things competing for your attention at the same time. And those two things need, I mean, I don't know, depending on how you conduct conversations, maybe that doesn't need your full attention, but, or who you might be talking to.
Right.
But if you're talking to someone you're in love with, yes, that's
Yeah,
going to take your full attention. And that's
exactly.
big competition. That's like you're now driving in conflict and you're not giving what either activity actually needs from you.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a good point. I was thinking that as you were leading up to that, I was like, yeah, well, you've got two sets of eyes, you know, on the road. So that helps, you're having that live conversation. Yeah.
What's really funny now that I said this out loud, it just occurred to me because I have always felt there were parts of my project with doing my dad's list. Like, that's, I was talking about the activism because that was the main reason when I
Yeah.
found it.
Hmm.
I had been an activist for a year, 2 years at that point, and thought there had to be something more that I could do because the statistics and the stories, that's what we do to educate. And education is part of it. Like, that's important. But I felt like I had to touch people's hearts somehow.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think when it touches your heart and you feel like this happened to me, I'm just like that person, we're connected, we're the same, that makes even more of an impact, I think.
I
Or like,
think you're right.
not
That's so
more,
powerful.
not more of one, but like it, I don't want to say it makes more of one because the people I know who are out there educating are working their asses off, honestly, and it matters. But I just
Hmm.
think there's different roads to doing it and different elements of it. And what I was doing was not quite the right element for me.
Hmm.
But anyway, all I was saying is that now that I'm saying out loud the whole like competing
Yeah.
activities thing with the driving and the talking, I'm realizing like before I found this list, and really it just transformed me. It gave me purpose, it gave me direction in my life. It helped me to find, the me that I am now, which is someone who's used by spirit, as
Yeah.
opposed to the much more fearful, worrying, pensive, almost passive person that I was before. That's almost like the same thing that happens when you're driving distracted because I was living distracted by beliefs and patterns of emotion and
Hmm.
just, things that I
Yeah.
had gleaned that were normal in an adult life that I was supposed to feel. But
Yeah.
sometimes we just learn these things and then it just becomes automatic and we
Right.
don't realize, oh, I got this from somewhere that wasn't even me.
Yeah. It's like autopilot,
That's right.
basically. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm realizing now, and I think I sort of had a concept of this before, but it's becoming more clear to me. There was something about the conscious way I was now living that needed to be experienced by people in cars when they were driving. And that's why I started to feel like, oh, well, if I share the story of this bucket list and of the way I became conscious,
Hmm.
then people might read it for whatever reason, whatever draws them to it. They
Hmm.
now become more conscious because they're inspired by me. And then
Hmm.
they're just automatically going to get in a car and drive differently.
Hmm. The story touches your heart. The education might get in your head, but when you bring it down into your heart and you feel it, it has that impact. It has that whoa. If I'm looking at my phone, I could kill somebody. Not only I could get killed, but I mean you do, like you feel it in your body and it really does have such an impact and it's such a powerful story and that message as well. It's the whole package. It's just thank you for doing it, Laura. Just thank you. It's just such a gift, you
I
know.
mean, the thing that's so amazing to me now is I had no idea it would become all of this.
Mm-mm.
Um, I had no idea I was going to be a person who was standing in a high school talking to kids about finding their true path in life
Wow.
and
Wow.
talking to kids about that. And that really, like, that was emotional for me, I realize now, because, when I was in high school, it wasn't the best time of my life. I was dealing with depression and
Yeah.
anytime we go into a high school, it sort of like brings back some stuff.
Right.
And we were there.
High school PTSD.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I was a person who didn't know how to use her voice. I just didn't.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and now I have high school kids signing my copy of my father's list, writing things like, "You have such an inspiring voice."
Oh, wow. That's so beautiful. Oh,
To me, that's like, this is even, I'm being used in a bigger way than, I want to help people stay alive in their cars, obviously, because of my
yeah.
personal experience with it. But I think I'm being used in a bigger way than that, because I get to be
Mhm.
someone who can say, "Hey, I have experience with this," and you can turn a tragic experience into a gift. You
Yes.
can. You
Mhm.
just have to find a way, as Joseph Campbell always said, you have to find a way to believe that you chose it.
Yes. Exactly. It's like in you said something else about Joseph Campbell, your wound is your gift. I think that's the quote.
Your
Yeah.
wound is where your treasure lies. Yeah,
Where your treasure lies.
that's his
Yeah.
riff on Nietzsche, because Nietzsche always said, when you stare into the abyss stares back into you, which
Mm,
is touching on the idea of, when people are in pain, the instinct is to hide,
yeah.
or to cover it.
Mhm.
You want to cover the wound so nobody sees it, and it's given time to heal without anything getting into it. Like, that's natural. That we're all animals. We're not just human beings. We're animals. It's natural that an animal will do that.
Mhm.
But as human beings, at some point, we need to satisfy what our spirits need to heal.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
spiritual healing, I think, doesn't come from that kind of hiding. It doesn't
Mhm.
come from guarding and protecting and avoiding. I mean, if people go through a lot of pain, they become avoidant people
Mhm.
sometimes. And it's like, yeah, I get it. You're in a vulnerable space, so you have to avoid more pain. But what happens is, you're just surviving, you're just staying alive, you're not living a life.
Yeah. And that pain, it's going to come out at
That's
one
right.
way or the other. And I know for me, the year after my mom died, and I'm not someone who cries easily, but I cried for a year, and I ran toward the grief, right? Ran toward the barking dog. Why was I able to do that? I don't know. Maybe the psychology degree, maybe years of therapy. I don't know. But I just knew that that was the only way that I had to go through it. You know, I had to go through it. And it was really like I couldn't not go through it because there it was. It was always there. It was always with me. But this came out of it, being, and when you said that you said, "I became the me that I am now," your whole body language, you sat up taller and it was
I
really cool.
really?
Yeah, you really did. It was it was really cool.
That's funny, because I've seen that happen before. Like, if I've watched an interview of myself, I've
Yeah.
seen myself do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So happy.
So
I mean, and since, like, we're sharing things like this, I just want to share, like, the whole time we've been talking, I have felt very much like your parents are right there behind you. There's one on either side of you.
mm,
It's a thing that started happening to me, when I started doing activism, because I think I was meeting so many families where someone had died.
yeah.
So this weird thing would start happening, and I'll tell you why I think it's real. I would start seeing what I believe to be an outline of the spirit, almost like, do you remember those Family Circus comics that
Yeah.
you've seen? Okay, it's because we're probably not too far in age. Like, it's from the 80s.
Yeah.
And they would show the grandparents who had died in the comics, and they were always like a dotted outline.
Oh, wow. Okay. I
That's
don't
what
remember that specifically, but
that's how they would show them, like, almost like the idea that they were like moving, like, things around the house,
oh,
you
wow.
know or
Yeah.
they also, it's funny, they also used it for if the kids were in trouble, and they'd be like, "Not me," or "I didn't do it," and then, like, they would Bill King would show, like, a little, like, gremlin or something, who had, like this, with, like, "Not me" written on it. But that's another use of it. But anyway, like, he would show this outline of them, and that's what it has felt like. I mean, I had it a little bit years ago, where my friend's father had died, and I could just, there was this moment where her sister was very upset, and I could see him just like I just felt it. He's here. He's
Mhm.
comforting her. I can see it. Um,
Wow.
and I thought, well, what was that? Like, that's not
Mhm.
real. My practical brain is like, what do you, you're just imagining it. You couldn't be seeing it. But then as I started meeting all these families, it was happening a lot. And it
Mm.
was always when they brought up the name, when they said the parent's name or the loved one's name and how much they were hurting,
Mhm.
that's when I would know, like I would see, oh, their arms around them or they're right there. And the way that I really knew that this was real, what was happening, whatever ability this is, one day I met a woman who had become an activist for safe driving. And she hadn't really talked in great detail about who it was who had died in the meeting that we
Mm.
had just had. And we were standing outside of the meeting in front of the building, just chatting away. And somehow it came up in conversation because I hadn't had it with her. I hadn't,
Yeah.
she was describing being in pain, but I didn't see them around her. And I thought, oh, that's weird. Usually I see them. Like, what's
Mhm.
going on? She revealed to me that the two people who had died were little children,
Mm.
her children. And
Oh.
suddenly I looked down and
Mm.
I sensed them around her legs.
Oh.
And I thought, that's why. That's why I didn't see them before. They were there the whole time. I just was looking in the wrong place.
Oh.
And I know that I'm sure I'm going to sound like insane to
Oh,
people,
you totally not to me.
but it's just the thing that happens whenever someone starts talking about the loved one, I just sense it that they're right. And I mean, and there was a moment in our conversation where you said, I feel like, and I'm paraphrasing you, but you said, I feel like my father died unsatisfied, or
Mhm.
like he didn't live. What were the words that you used? He
I
didn't live.
don't think he ever really self-actualized. I don't know if that's what I said, but, like, he felt, like, unfulfilled, like.
You said you didn't, the lights just got brighter around you, by the way. And you said you felt like he didn't have his purpose, or he didn't, I think that's what you said, he didn't accomplish
Yeah,
what he was supposed to do.
yeah.
And immediately what entered my mind, and this is like we said, it's like this, it's urgent when it happens. Immediately what entered my mind when you said that was, no, that's false. He absolutely did what he was here to do because he had you.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what that means to you, but that was the thought I immediately had.
Oh my god. I call them in whenever I do this. I always call them in, and it's really interesting that you said that because there was a moment I know we probably should wrap up because I wanna be respectful of your time, but also I could just talk to you forever.
Oh, I feel the same way. Well, I don't want to mess up your recording though,
No,
because I
I
know
don't
you have
think
a
I
time
don't
limit
think
and
you're
you're gonna have
messing
to
it
edit
up at
this.
all. No, no, let's just roll with it. Well, after so he had his dad, was difficult. They had a difficult relationship. He shared a story with me that when he came back after 2 years in the army and his dad saw him, he just said, "Oh, you're back," which kinda tells you a lot, right? So I know that he was wounded, and after his dad died, and this was I don't even know how many years ago. It was probably 20, at least 20 years ago. He had come to Ohio for the funeral. All my family was originally from Ohio, but my parents moved to California in 1960, I think. First, my dad went. Then he wrote my mom all these letters to convince her to go, and she was only 19. And I actually found all the letters in the garage when we were cleaning everything out. I
Wow.
I haven't read all of them yet, but anyway, he as we were driving back from the funeral, my ex-husband was driving and my dad was in the front seat and I was in the back seat, and my dad said, "I feel such relief now that my old man is gone." That's what he called him, my old man. And then he said, "I never should have had children, and I feel terrible about what I did to you kids when you were small." Now, he didn't mean that he regretted having us. He meant that he regretted that he wasn't, the father that he could have been, or maybe he couldn't have been. He was doing the best, but I knew he was doing the best he could, and that was the only thing I could say at that time. It was the only time that I mean, there was, like, a lot of physical abuse, and it was the only time that it was really acknowledged, and that was his kind of apology, you know? And so I just said, well, I know you did the best you could. But it's so interesting that you said he fulfilled his purpose because he had you. And if you think about that, you chose this life, this death, then, I believe I chose them to be my parents, right? Whoever whatever, wherever you exist before you're born, you kind of get this assignment, and you probably can say, I don't think so, or yeah, I'm going to go for it. I see it's going to be tough, but that's okay. I'm up for the task, right? As Stacy would say, I'm game. So I just think that's really cool that you said that, and I love that you said that you see them behind me, because I feel them too, and I called them in.
I mean, I can't imagine what that moment was like for you, though. How old were you
Oh,
when he said that?
oh, I was 27. I was 27 when he
I
said
mean,
that.
and how many times do people have that moment in their lives where a parent apologizes?
Only one other time, and that was right when I got to my mom's house, and the first time I saw her, when knowing that she had this diagnosis. And I always had PTSD going home. Not that there weren't really good memories too, but it was the same house I grew up in, where some not such great stuff happened. And apropos of nothing, my mom says, if he did those things today, he'd go to prison. That was child abuse. And my mom had always not defended him, but not protected us either. And I was again in the same, like, I don't know what to say. It's kind of like, well, we've never discussed the elephant in the room before. Why start now? Because I had made my peace already, and I didn't need to bring it up. But it was so important, on like a to the inner child, that they both did that individually. Now, I was 56. I was 56 when my mom passed. So,
In addition to being physically abusive, which I'm really sorry that you had to go through, in addition to that, was like, what was his personality like with you? Was he like very critical and like motivating you to achieve? Like, was his love sort of like conditional?
you know, that's what they really weren't. My mom was always really encouraging, like, you can do anything, you're so smart. And my dad's, he wasn't critical in that way. It all came out of like his rage, which could be triggered by anything at all. And knowing as an adult looking back, I don't think my brother and I, we were so scared. I don't think we ever did anything where the punishment fit the crime. It could be, you built a fort in the living room. I don't want it to be there anymore. Um, so yeah. Yeah, I think it was just rage. And it is an interesting thing to grow up with, because it never leaves you, but it also informs who you are. Uh, Because for me, it was like, well, I have to get over this, not over it, but I have to find a way through it, which was why I was a psychology major, and I was always seeking, and I was reading self-help books in my 20s, and searching. And for me, it was, the writing started as journaling. So a lot of journaling kind of brought me through to this place, because I knew that, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be that angry person, and I didn't want, if I ever had children, I wasn't going to do those things. So by default, they kind of gave me this awareness, this heightened self-awareness, because there's a lot of ways you could go with that. You could repeat that cycle. And I was like, no, the cycle is going to stop with me.
Well, I mean, what I have found the key is, because I also would think that way, with whatever it was with my dad that I struggled with. Um, but I think the key is focusing on the good, zeroing in
Mhm.
on what was positive, what was loving,
Yes.
that's why my dad's list set me free, because I
Mm.
was connecting to who he really was underneath whatever conditioned him to be how he was.
Yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
the mistake people make a lot is like, oh, this happened to me. I need to not be that way. But it's just like when you ask someone, don't think of a polar bear. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
That's not how our brains don't compute negative. That's why. Like it's like
Mhm.
you're just going to think of it. And if your focus is on don't be this, don't be this, don't be this, somehow in some way in your life, you're going to find yourself being it. And that's what I was doing. I resented parts of my dad that I viewed as irresponsible or self-centered.
Mhm.
Now I don't think that they were, but at the time I thought that they were. And I kept finding myself doing irresponsible, self-centered things and berating myself for it and
Mm.
being like, oh, I'm just cursed. This is
Mm.
the thing that he had that I have. I can't not be it. I'm doomed. This is life. I can't do it's genetic. I can't. And it's not genetic. It's nurture. It's conditioning. If you're
Exactly.
writing it, you're just exposed to it as normal when it's not normal. Have you
Yeah.
seen the movie The Iron Claw?
No.
It was so weird to me just now that you described that memory from the funeral because I just watched it 2 nights ago with my
Mhm.
husband, and he'd already seen it a while ago. We got it. I don't remember what streaming service, maybe Netflix, but it just became available on something somewhere.
Okay.
And anyway, it's. I don't want to give away the story because it's a remarkable story
Okay.
to watch, but it really covers that whole like nature versus nurture, and it's based on a true story, this family of wrestlers called the Von Erichs. And it was four brothers who were these wrestlers and how their relationship with their dad affected their lives. And there's a moment in the story where Zac Efron is the main brother, the main character. He's at a funeral and he's telling his wife, because he's now gotten into this habit of not going home at night. And he's telling his wife, because his wife's like, "Oh, are you coming home tonight?" And she's holding their baby.
Mm.
And he's like, "I can't." And he's like, "I don't know. I can't. I don't think so." And she's like, "This isn't working for me."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I have sympathy for the fact that we're at a funeral and how difficult this just was, but this is not working. And he's like, "It's just, I'm afraid he's going to get it too about the baby because he really believed there was a family curse. And that the curse
Wow.
was what made his father the way he was. And the curse was what made him and his brothers the way that they were experiencing life. And it was a thing that lived inside of them that they couldn't get rid of. So, I mean, I just saw that 2 nights ago.
Wow. Wow. Mm. Yeah,
And
I'll
I
have
have,
to
I
watch
have to
that.
tell you, like, it's very powerful. I mean, this is like really emotional for me. It's very powerful when you choose to be the person who doesn't repeat the patterns. And
Mm.
it's not just powerful for you,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
that's a brave choice to make.
Mm.
It's a vulnerable choice to make. And you will see the effects on other people. Someone has to go first.
Mm.
And I really believe your dad is right there. He's helping you navigate this.
He is. Yeah. He is. Like we have a different relationship now. And so much that stuff got healed. And that was one of the hidden gifts, you know? It was hard to go into that little house and take care of her with him still there, even kind of yelling at her right up until, the end. And yeah, and it was so hard for me to watch that. It was like I could leave, but you stayed married to him. But it, I don't know, it got healed. The hidden gifts was that.
She had a different relationship with him than
Mm,
you did.
yeah. She didn't experience physical abuse, but everybody walked on eggshells basically in my house. You didn't want to make him mad, but you didn't necessarily know what was going to make him mad. So I saw my mother continuing to do those things, and I think that was part of the OCD
Well,
because
that's
she, yeah,
part
yeah.
of what you're going through now. I think is her purpose for living, is her legacy too, because whatever she couldn't
Mm,
do while living, you're getting to live out.
yes. Oh, so much, and I can hear her saying, "Julie, you're so good at this and that." She was always so proud of me. She found all my UCLA notebooks in the garage, and their garage is a whole other story, but it's like, "Do you want these?" She would text me pictures, "Do you want these old stuffed animals? Do you want your" I'm like, "No, no, I really don't want those things," but she said, "I don't know how you did all those things, all those notes you took," you know? She was always really proud of me, and I was such a little rebel, you know, that I would just do things and they just couldn't believe, you know, that I would go after those things. And yeah, it's like, hey, you know, I've always wanted to write their story, my story and their story too. So it's really awesome talking to you because you did that. You did the thing that I want to do. I did start the podcast and I still want to write the book. And so it's very cool seeing, and that's not even the best word, but seeing that you did that, it makes me feel like I can do that too. It's just in its own time.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to say, like, touching on your mom, and this isn't something I often have a chance to talk about, and I haven't done as many interviews recently because the book came out a year ago almost. But I'm happy to get the chance to talk about this because one thing I've realized only recently is that while my dad's spirit and reconnecting and finding peace with him helped me to do the list and finish the book more than anything else did, although my husband helped me quite a great deal, it's been my mom who has helped me in the aftermath of the book,
Hmm.
of being that public figure for however long that was going to last, of figuring out how to navigate where I am now and what I'm going to do with this. And, my mom was a guidance counselor, and
Mm.
she's just such a peacemaking, harmony embracing person. She's a great listener. She helps people find who they really are. And, while I was
Mm.
embodying my dad, doing the list, going on all these adventures for him, which I think he experienced through me,
Mhm.
his intentions for his life. Um, Finding the money somehow to do it because that was his only regret in life. I asked him one of the last times I saw him, "Do you regret anything?" And he said, I never had enough money to do everything I wanted to do.
Mm.
And
Mm.
somehow magically I had it. I found it. I got the jobs I needed to get it. And that was me channeling him, going on book talks and speaking on TV. That's the performer in him. That's me channeling him.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in a position where I can counsel people and I can help people and I can help other people write their stories, I can motivate people to find the healing that I found. That's my mom. That's her legacy. And it's
Mm.
just been so um, life affirming that I get to have that bonding experience with her while she's alive.
Yes. Yeah.
And she can see it. Like she can see,
Mm.
and I hope she sees that it's her too. She can see her legacy in me, I hope.
I'm sure she can. That's beautiful. Wow. And that it's not lost on you too, you know, that you're having this amazing relationship now with your mom, you
I'm
know?
starting to see it. Yeah. And isn't that funny? Because I thought going after my dad's dreams was sort of going against my mom, because she wanted me to have a good life that was secure. Like she was
Yeah.
very into security. She wanted me to become a mom myself and, have what she considers to be a very good life. And it was, I think, very understanding of her to recognize I'm my own person and
Mm.
my path is going to be what it needs to be and to guide me on it, even if she didn't understand it fully.
Mm.
And I was really just really worried that because I would always feel like I was closer to her than to my dad. And am I defying her by
Mhm.
leaning into his dreams and his adventures and kind of being what I could seem to be childish in the beginning? I didn't understand. No, I'm accessing my inner child, and that's a good thing. Um,
Yes.
so to now feel like, oh, she is like, we met a famous author the other night. We went to a reading together. And at the end of meeting him, she said to him, "I'm so proud of my little girl,"
Aw. Oh,
which was
wow.
embarrassing. But to have that moment where she said that was so,
Yeah. Yes,
and
absolutely.
I really,
Oh.
I share that because I hope the people who listen to your podcast who probably are going through grief are trying to figure out how to turn it into a gift, both for themselves and for others. I hope that if they listen to this and are dealing with fears of what might become of them if they do that, and what will people think of them, and will people still love them if their identity grows and changes, because it is going to, if you go on some kind of journey like that, it's going to. I just would encourage them to do what their heart tells them to do, because I'm not going to lie and say it's not scary. It is.
Yeah.
Some of your relationships might change,
Yeah.
but it's okay, because whatever love you feel like you're receiving as this like almost half version of you, where you're controlled by your limiting beliefs about your life,
Mm.
where you pretend in order to be liked by people,
Yeah.
that does not compare to the love you're going to be allowed to let in once you're being authentic to yourself. It's so
Amen.
much richer, it's so much bigger, and you can really feel it all the way.
Yeah. Mm. Thank you. That is like the perfect uh, way to wrap up. I feel like that, and that's exactly what I'm hoping, but you just said it so perfectly. This has
But it's
just
scary.
it is scary. It really is. It was really scary for me to start a podcast, and like, I'll say like one more thing is that when I started all of this, it was not, oh, I hope I'm gonna make a lot of money. I'm not even, I have no idea if that's gonna happen or not. It would be that'd be cool if
It
I
probably
finish
will.
my book and Stacy says I will. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it too.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, I feel like I'm on this path now, and there's nothing, there's nowhere else for me to go but through this. This is where I'm meant to be. This is my path. This was my calling. This is where I belong, and I've got my spirit parents with me, and I get
Well,
to talk to people like you,
I
which
mean,
is so fun.
when I say that though, that it will, it's just a hunch I have. But I just want to emphasize for for your listeners, I almost said readers, you will have readers, for your listeners.
Thank you.
When I say that it will, it's because it's just to sustain what you're supposed to do. Like when people are like, oh, I'm a starving artist and that's noble. It's like, yeah, but think about how many more people you could reach if you were sustained financially enough to do it. Like I want to have money in my dad's foundation. So
Yeah,
I'm able to be someone who helps people check an item off their bucket list and get them started in a bigger way than
yeah.
just inspiring them to do it. And I really feel in every ounce of my being that that's what I'm supposed to do. And it's going to take money to do that.
Mhm.
It's just a tool.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, when you're using it as a tool for good, just it's just gonna multiply.
It's a wonderful thing. Having
Absolutely.
resources is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. It's energy, right? You're putting this energy out into the world, and it's gonna come back, and you're putting more out, and it's just this wonderful cycle that's just gonna grow and
Yeah, I
continue.
mean, that's why I wear the horseshoe. You
That
know,
fell off. Yeah.
that's why I wear it. And I think there's a reason it fell off, because I think something is telling me I don't need it. I've been wearing it less and less lately.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
I think
wait, exactly what does the horseshoe mean to you?
so briefly,
Mhm.
I used to be a TV recapper. I used to recap multiple shows. One of them was Mad Men.
Oh
And
God, I loved Mad Men.
now I feel like the shows I was choosing were always just about dads. Like I did Lost and then I did Mad Men. And it's like Lost is all these people on an island who have like parent issues.
Yes.
And Mad
Dad
Men, of course,
issues.
is like this mysterious dad who lives a double life, who, if people read my book, they'll know that that's sort of who my dad was.
Mhm.
But anyway, while I was researching that show, near the end of my recaps, I learned that Matthew Weiner, who created Mad Men, almost called it the horseshoe. Because, and this is a spoiler, I covered it like lightly in my book, so eventually like you'll get to it. But
Yeah.
um, he almost called it that because there's a moment in the show where it's a flashback, because now you've watched the show, right? And I'm sorry,
Yes.
I'm going to spoil Mad Men. So if you haven't seen it,
No,
it's
I've seen the whole thing, I think
been.
twice. I think twice.
But anyways,
Yeah,
cover
but
your ears, as my dad would
right,
say, when he
listeners, if
told
you
dirty
haven't
jokes.
watched it.
anyway, what's revealed that Don Draper's real identity is a man named Dick Whitman, and he grew up poor, and he's embarrassed of that. Do you remember?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
Mhm.
there's a scene, there's a flashback where he's on the farm and he's talking to his mother, who's had a very difficult life. And a lot of it was because she thought she couldn't have children. And he actually is a child of, he's a product of an affair, and she felt forced to adopt him. He was another woman's child that the father had. And she does eventually have her, they do have their own child eventually, but there's a scene where she's telling him and she's holding it up, a horseshoe. And she says, Dick, life is like a horseshoe, open on both ends, hard all the way through. That's how she described it. And so I started researching, why was Matthew Weiner obsessed with that symbol? To the point where if you actually look at the show, and part of my job being a TV recapper was finding Easter eggs, because that's, you just find little visual things to support your thesis that you're sharing. And I looked through and I could see there's horses everywhere in that show. I mean, his father literally dies from a horseshoe to the face.
Oh, yeah.
The horse kicks him. But if you
Wow.
look at the moment when the father dies and he has like the imprint of the horseshoe, it's
Mhm.
like this. It's a U shape on his face.
Oh my
But
God.
when the mother holds it up and is telling him this is life is like a horseshoe, she's
Yeah.
not holding it in the U shape. She's holding it in the necklace position that I wear, the arch.
Oh, yeah.
But then I suddenly started wondering, well, what's the difference? You
Uh-huh.
know, like there must be, because when you're a recapper, you have to assume there's some kind of method to the madness. There must be some reason that he had the guy with the U shape on his face that killed him, and she has it as an arch. Like they're two different genders, and they're in a relationship. Something's being said about genders here and relationships.
Yeah.
What I started to learn is that actually the horseshoe is a very feminine symbol.
Okay.
So oftentimes when you see paintings of the Virgin Mary, she's in like an arch.
Yes.
There's something
Oh.
around her.
Mhm.
And that's actually the term for that shape is the lozenge. And,
Okay.
and that even appears in like weaving from various different countries. You'll see rugs from Morocco and they have this lozenge, like a repeated diamond. And if you can think about like what would this shape represent on a
Mhm.
woman?
Like,
It's it's the birth canal. It's
yes.
that part of your body
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
gives birth. So it
Yeah.
makes sense that Dick's mother, Don Draper's mother, who had trouble giving birth and feels ashamed of her life and thinks life is hard, it makes sense that she would embrace this version of the
Hmm.
horseshoe.
Hmm.
And one thing I gradually started to learn is that the horseshoe became a symbol of good luck for multiple reasons. One of them was that it resembled that shape of the vulva, like that's really
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, it was that it was made of iron. And like during the Iron Age, like Irish people, the Celts, like Europeans, they thought, oh, this is magic. This is the strongest thing there is.
Hmm.
It was also what it was made of. Like she says, it's hard all the way through.
Yeah.
So what started happening was people started hanging them over doorways
Right.
because they felt very superstitious about them and they had power. Like there was some kind of power that would protect people who had a horseshoe.
Yeah.
But they hung it in two different positions. So sometimes you'll see it over a doorway in the arch, like she was describing, and
Hmm.
sometimes, and like the Virgin Mary, the vulva,
Yeah.
sometimes you'll see it as a U. You mostly see it as a U in America, in Ireland, and in England. You
Mm.
mostly see it as an arch in Spain, in the Middle East, in Asia, in those parts of the world. And what's the difference between those parts of the world?
Well, the way that the feminine is perceived,
Yeah,
maybe?
well, it's patriarchy,
Yeah. The patriarchy. Yeah.
it's individualism. You know,
Yeah.
when you're talking about America and Western Europe, then you're talking about rugged individualism.
Yes.
You're talking about the notion that you build your own life. You're
Mhm.
talking about capitalism. Uh,
Yeah.
People who think that they have to conserve and that everything they have, they've earned. They are self-made men. So it makes
Yeah.
complete sense that Dick Whitman, who was this remote, unemotional father who did not teach his son how to express anything,
No.
would die with the U shape on his face because that's how he lived his life, right?
Yeah.
And this poor woman who was his wife, who had the arch and didn't get to feel that expression of her individual self. She's telling Dick, oh, this is what life is, and it's hard.
Yeah.
She's not getting to be that. And really, that is how the lucky parts of the horseshoe started to be interpreted around the world, which was, a woman's reproductive ability is so powerful, and it's life affirming and it's life giving. And
Yeah.
when the Christian patriarchy took over, and I am Christian, by the way, and somewhat agnostic, but when the Christian patriarchy took over, it was more about conserving and listening to men. And we see more pictures of men in churches, and it's all about Christ and God is male.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these representations of pagan goddesses, and
Yeah.
there's a real thing that exists that I only just learned about recently. In Ireland, if you go to churches there that are like, some of the churches are in ruins, you sometimes will see something they call the Sheila Nagig.
Uh-huh. I'm familiar with
You know what
that.
that
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
that's the horseshoe.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same vulva shape that is around the Virgin Mary. That is always going to be attached to women who represent fertility. And,
Mm-hmm.
I only just found out the other day, because what I liked about the symbol as I was going through the list, and I started out the list wearing the U-shaped horseshoe.
Mm-hmm.
I would wear it for every list item. But then halfway through, I switched it and I started wearing the arch-shaped one. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned that that meant that luck rains down upon you. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, you have to let go in order for it to happen. And you have to be in the flow of giving to others and being used as a vehicle, as we were discussing, because that's what you're here to do. And you don't have to hold on, because when you hold on, you're also sort of not letting things in. That's the U shape. So I wanted to now embody the arch, which I felt like was more how my father lived.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've been learning recently also, they hung it over doorways because it was protective,
Mm-hmm.
because it was representing the way we enter life and the way we exit it.
Mm.
There was a time when women were, just revered in that way.
Oh
That we
yeah.
seen as so powerful, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate symbol of creativity.
Yeah. Mm.
So basically, that's what the horseshoe means to me. And it's much scarier to wear it this way,
Mm.
just the more feminine way, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It just
No.
is, because those are the standards we live by.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
I don't even remember why you asked me this, how it came
Well, we
up,
were
but
talking about it falling off, and yeah.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I think the reason it fell off is because I'm not supposed to need it anymore, because I have it inside of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yes. Perfect. I hear your cat.
I know I'm not being a very good cat mother, I'll get
Uh,
which is
I have one
ironic.
too.
Yeah, she needs water, so I need to
Probably
go.
time to feed the
Yeah.
cat. Yeah.
And she's just thirsty. She needs water. She has a
Yeah.
thyroid condition. But
Aw.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Love to talk to you again. So fun.
Yeah, this was
So
great.
much.
This was
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and being so vulnerable. And you're an excellent interviewer, and you're gonna go really far with this.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. Mm,
And we'll talk more. We'll talk
we
more soon.
will. Definitely. All right. Take
All
care.
right.
All
Talk
right.
soon. Have
Bye.
a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye.